Hello and welcome to the Blether with me, William.
And me, Gary. In your Dance Scottish Together Easy each month, we'll be talking to guests about dancing, music, and other aspects of Scotland's rich cultural heritage and how it links to our society. And before we start, thanks to those of you who sent in some questions for our Blether today. At the end of each one, we'll let you know who's next up, and we'll be reminding you of the date for getting your questions into us.
Yeah, but we can't promise, of course, to go through them all, but we'll do our best to include your questions if we can. In this first edition of the Blether, we thought what better place to start than with our COO at the office in Edinburgh, Coates Crescent, that famous address. And it's Jon Berridge, 1 year into the job. Jon, how do you see the RSCDS? Welcome to you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on the very first Blether. It's a real honour. Yeah, it's been a year in post for me now, and a really busy one, obviously, with it being centenary year. So it's been great, in at the deep end, and I've had an absolute blast.
Great, Jon. I should explain what the Blether is. Gary, you can explain what a Blether is. I mean, a Blether is a bit of a chit chat, isn't it?
Just a bit of a conversation between folk. You would just sit down with a cup of tea and just have a blether with each other, just a chat. So that's what we're planning to do each month.
And it might, I mean, a blether could also be like, at the end of the street having a wee gossip. So gossip, blether. Gossip in the RSCDS.
This is where you'll hear the gossip of the RSCDS first.
So
I bet it's not.
Stay tuned in every month. Get your cup of tea ready, and when you get your Dance Scottish together, and look forward to the Blether. But anyway, great to have you, Jon. Yeah, 1 year into the job, and you had to hit the ground running, didn't you? Because it was a centenary year. It was amazing.
It was, and so I came into this post as an interim initially, and I think my second week I was up at winter school for the day with you, William, being shown around and introduced to everybody, and I thought it was pretty quick for me. Maybe my second week or third week, the penny dropped, and I thought, this is a bit special. I might need to put my hat in the ring for the permanent gig when it comes up.
Yeah, we hadn't exactly, said to you, maybe you should apply for the job, Jon. It was we kind of and taking you around winter school, of course. You were very polite there about the way I took you around winter school. I actually took you by the collar and said, come and meet this one, come and meet the next one, come and talk to that one, come and talk to that one. But we were delighted when you put your hat in the ring, weren't we, Gary, that Jon would apply for this job.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jon, you mentioned the centenary year there. We had the open day at Coates Crescent, which staff were involved in as well. And from there, you've got quite a special collection of furniture now in your office.
That's right, I do. So that was another thing that was a bit of a first, I believe, at least in a long time, to have an open day. And we had no idea how it would go, but it was packed, especially in the morning. Just had people coming through the door non-stop, and we thought we'd make a few cups of tea, but we actually had to take shifts, and we had a line of 3 people making teas and coffees and passing them out to guests coming in. It was fantastic. And yet, Gary, we brought up some of the furniture from downstairs that, the things from the archive, 2 record players and a desk. And a lot of those things kind of looked right in the rooms they're in now. So we've left them where they were, and they're just now part of the everyday office, which is feels really good, actually.
Yeah, actually, the desk itself was, there's a lovely picture of Miss Haddon, who our members and dancers will know as Miss Haddon's Reel, of course, the secretary. Lovely picture of Miss Haddon sitting at that very desk with a phone and some ornaments. And we recreated that picture with you, Jon, because we've got the phone, we've got the ornaments, we've got the desk. So it's a lovely picture to have. But no, it was a great thing, the open day. And since then, of course, the big black door has stood open, and you're welcoming folk into the office now if they happen to be in Edinburgh.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's so I remember the first day I got here, the door was shut and there were signs up in the windows saying by appointment only. And
I think I was with you, and I said, Jon, can we get those signs down, please?
Yeah, so those are gone, and the door is open, even on cold days when it should probably be shut. It's open, and we get people coming in. You'll often get folk who maybe they're visiting Edinburgh and they come by Coates Crescent just to get a shot outside is their plan, and the door's open, so they kind of tentatively knock and come on in, and we'll make them a cup of tea and show them around and have a chat. And yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah, if anyone's in Edinburgh for the day and they fancy dropping by for a visit, please do.
Great.
Yeah. And there's a shop there now as well, isn't there, John?
There is. We've got a wee
office.
shop set up in the front office that Cecile looks after. Many of the members will know Cecile from membership communications and so on. And that's the other thing that's really nice. I've noticed when people do drop by, they've often emailed or spoken to staff members before, but they've never met them. And so it's nice to be in the office and put a face to a name.
John, we often get asked, Gary and I, when we're out and about the money. It's always like, where does the money get spent for our membership fee? So maybe here's a moment in time where we can just let everybody know, because I'm sure you've got some figures that you can share with us about that.
Sure, yeah. So something I've heard a lot too, and I was actually up at Winter School this year, and I gave a short presentation on various things, but the first year and what the RSCDS is doing. And I did address some of these questions then, and I think it's important too. So the membership fee is one source of income for us. It's probably our biggest single source of income. And about 65 pence in every membership pound is spent on direct charitable activity. So that's things like education and training and promoting Scottish country dance and the website and all that kind of stuff. About 20 pence is spent on governance, and about 18 pence on other bits and pieces like fundraising and so on. So that's where it goes. It is important to say, because I've heard a lot of people ask, well, does the membership fee support summer school and winter school? The answer is no, those are self-funding. So none of the membership fee goes to that. It does pay for things like the office, but we're very lucky that the Society decided to buy this lovely building back in the 60s. So actually the overheads that we have for our office space are really low. So yeah, that's how the membership fees is spent. And then of course we have other forms of income too.
Yeah. Now, John, we're obviously a dancing organisation, but you've come from a kind of non-dancing background. One of the questions we've had in from one of our members is that you visited St Andrews last year and joined the beginners class. So how did you find that experience, and have you kept up dancing since?
Okay, so my wife and I signed up for that. I'd done some social dancing at school, and then when I lived in Asia for about 15 years, I would go to Burns nights and that kind of thing, and maybe 4 times a year, and dance there. But my wife's Canadian, she's never done any dancing. So for her, it was a start from scratch thing. And I sort of thought I'd walk into it and it would all come back to me. They'd be fine by day 2. Sorely mistaken I was. But no, it was fantastic. It's a really immersive thing. And we really enjoyed it. We met some lovely people. The teacher was great. It was a great chance for me to get to meet lots of members. I suppose, though, for someone who's starting from absolute scratch, my wife was, summer school's maybe not the right thing, because it's full on. I mean, for someone who Scottish country dancing is a hobby, it's nirvana, because you're living, breathing it every day. 3 hours in the morning, dances every night, chatting about it at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I think for a complete newbie, it's maybe a wee bit too much. So we probably need to look at a different kind of event to attract new people to Scottish country dancing.
Yeah,
the second part of that question was, am I still that? Yes, we've signed up with the Edinburgh branch to go to their beginner and Cayley classes, which we've been doing. And I think the next step for us will be to go to some Cayleys and maybe even reeling clubs and stuff to find out, how those work, because I'm really keen to sort of understand all the different paths into Scottish country dancing that are out there, because I think that's where we need to be making connections.
I think that's really interesting, John, what you said about the beginners classes. And I think for those of us like Gary and I that have kind of fell out our prams doing this, it's very difficult for us to actually, remember what it was like to be that beginner. And especially, I think, when you come into it, dare I say, sort of middle age or older than that, it must be really hard to come into a group. And as you say, everybody else is immersed in it. But yeah, to get back to the office, I mean, the staff are terrific. We've got a great bunch of staff in there that you've got to know really, really well. But sometimes, our members may not know exactly what each of the members of staff do. So could you take us through that and just let us know what everybody does at Coates Crescent?
Yeah, sure. And actually, that's another thing that comes up a lot. People want to know who's in the office, what everybody does, and also how much we're spending on staff. And I think that's something that I'd like to address head on, because I've heard that asked quite a bit. So last year we spent about 32% of our total spend was on staff costs, which some people will think that's a lot, some people will think it's not a lot. But to put it into perspective, the average charity like us, and by like us, I mean about our size, turnover-wise, and also, delivering services and so on like we do, in the UK spends about 61% of their total spend is on staff costs. So we're spending about half the amount that a charity like us usually spends on staffing, which is great. And the other way of looking at that is we've got 7 staff, and the average charity like us in the UK has about 25. So any way you look at it, we've got a very lean staff headcount. And part of the way that we've achieved that, I mean, partly that's due to the volunteers. We've got so many hardworking, passionate volunteers that enable us to run on a much smaller staff team. And part of it's because the staff members each wear at least 2 hats. So we've got someone who looks after the membership database and communicating with branches, and also the shop and merchandising and MS. Someone else will be looking after all the graphic design and branding, and also website updates and so on. So that's kind of how we've done that. And so in the office, we've got finance manager, we've got website graphic design, we've got a receptionist, we've got a membership services officer, we've got our comms officer, and we've got our events manager, and of course myself.
Yeah, great.
Fantastic. And you mentioned, John, that you'd spent some time in Asia as well. What's your background? Have you fallen into the Royal Scottish Country Dance Society?
Here we go.
I think most of us do. But what's your background? Where have you come from? What have you done to give the members a flavour? Give the members a flavour of your past history.
Yeah, let's start with where you come from. Come on. Where are you?
All right. So I'm from Dundee. I was born in Dundee, and I hadn't appreciated until I got back to Scotland how useful that is, because everyone asks where you're from, and when you say Dundee, it's kind of a relaxed thing. Oh, okay. So it's like almost like the Switzerland of Scotland. I feel like it's neutral ground. But yeah, so I did my master's in New York at Columbia University, and I'd always planned on working in the nonprofit sector. So my master's was in essentially like a business management program for the nonprofit model. And then when I finished my master's, I started working in the record business in New York, which has nothing to do with it couldn't be further from nonprofit. It was quite eye-opening. And I'm not sure how that happened, but I ended up with a career in marketing in Asia and North America. And when we moved back to the UK in 2014, I took a bit of time off, and that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to get back to where I wanted to be in the first place, which is the nonprofit sector. So since we got back, I've worked for the Royal Osteoporosis Society and Carers Trust in sort of business development and fundraising management roles. So this, in some respects, this is a logical progression for me, but it is a very different type of organization from anything I've ever worked at before. So
now you talked about music in New York. So because you're a guitarist, aren't you? Were you playing at Radio City or something exotic, or Madison Square Garden? Were you appearing there on a Saturday night? Or
I wish, William. No, my guitar playing career ended many years ago. I learnt my limitations, and I still play for fun. But no, I was working at a place called the Knitting Factory doing their marketing, and it was a cool little record label and club with 3 stages. There's a bunch of them now. There's one in LA and one in San Francisco. It's quite well known. And it was a sort of club in New York where people would go to do what they love doing. So we had Debbie Harry from Blondie was there, not playing with Blondie, but playing with a band called the Jazz Passengers. So she was singing, from the American Songbook.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. Yoko Ono was there with her son, Sean. I think it was his first gig. And she was doing what you'd expect Yoko to be doing, basically screaming like a banshee and waving her arms around. It was weird, but it was a fantastic place to work, and a great place for me to start after my master's, my first sort of real job in any kind of industry. It was a real eye opener. Aye.
John, you're in big shoes being our COO, and I'm thinking back, as many of our members will do, to Lieutenant Colonel Muriel Gibson, who was secretary when I was a wee boy. And I have to say, I got to know Muriel very well and reminded her often of the day I turned up in Edinburgh as a young student, knocked on the big black door, and it opened about 2 inches, and this fearsome lady, as I thought at the time, just answered with yes, and then proceeded to hand me a note with a phone number on it. Phone that number if you want to dance in Edinburgh, goodbye, and shut the door. But I got to know her very, very many years later, and I often pulled her leg about that one. But she was a great secretary for the society. But recently, now here's the gossip coming. Here's the gossip coming, because Gary sent me something that he had discovered on International Women's Day. Gary, didn't you?
Yeah, so on International Women's Day, that was a piece in one of the Scottish newspapers, which was highlighting some of the key women within the Scottish independence movement. And actually, Muriel Gibson was one of those because she was quite high up in the Scottish National Party and quite influential in the independence movement. But interestingly, in the article, it mentions that she was arrested. I suspect through her Scottish independence work and rather than her RSCDS work, but hey, you never know.
You never know. What a
So
great...
we'll maybe keep any questions about arrests till a different time, I think.
Yeah. I think it was just before the Second World War. I think they rounded them up just to check that they were not collaborating or something. And in the story, it talks about her mother shouting at the folk who were arresting her, telling them that they need to bring her back the way that she left here or something like that. So, but I think it's just great story that. So, John, just watch yourself, okay? We're. But big shoes to fill. No, absolutely great lady altogether. We had another question come in, which I'm delighted about, a question from New Zealand.
Yes.
Well, it was great to see a question coming from New Zealand till I read the question. And the question is, John, how do you get New Zealand men to dance? You put a kilt on and do the hackers? I don't know how you do it. Something like that.
I think that's one for you guys. You've been getting people started dancing, for decades. So how would you go about it?
Come on, Mr. Coull, how do you do it?
Well, thanks very much. That's slopey shoulders from the chair there. I think it's just giving them confidence and treating men like any other beginners that you would, and ensuring that they're enthused when they come through the door, and making sure that if they have something to turn up to. So you go into a demonstration somewhere and you advertise that you've got a class, making sure that they've got something to go to. But then once they actually turn up, making them feel welcome, adapting for the teachers to adapt their program to make sure that they can cope with it, and for the other dancers, making sure that they include that new person and make sure that just that welcoming feeling of that social atmosphere within a class or a dance or whatever it is, and no prodding and poking and pulling and nipping and things like that. Just making folk feel welcome and making it sociable.
Yeah, I think it's general across the board, isn't it? It's never mind that. Interestingly enough, though, there's an invitation round about here to go to the men's shed and do some Scottish country dance. That's going to be an interesting one. So we'll see how that goes. It may be, they find it easier on their own, and so what would you do? Try and do the reel of the 50, a man's dance kind of thing. But that's another story. But it was an interesting question. I kind of know what they meant by that. What struck me first of all was, does that mean New Zealand men are doorer than Scotsmen? But I'm sure that can't be the case, but there we are.
No, if you're anything to go by, William.
Thanks very much. That's great. Yeah. When did you last buy me a drink? That's another thing. But anyway. So John, to get back to the office and so on, are you optimistic for the society? I mean, we're growing, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. I think very optimistic, actually, when you look at what's going on around us and how much things have changed since the pandemic. I mean, obviously, we did take a hit during the pandemic. Other arts and cultural organizations that I know of are on the brink of collapsing because COVID's just done for them. Any organization that's relied on events, and we do, events are a big part of what we do. It's a face-to-face activity. So if you can't get together, you can't do it. And you did manage actually over COVID to put some things together online, which was great. And I think it's that kind of creative thinking that's maybe kept the organization on its feet. I certainly feel like I'm coming to an organization that's in a really solid place. There's been some great decisions made in the past about how things should be done. And you know, the investments that have been made, the way that things are set up, I think is very effective and efficient, and it's put us in a place where we can continue to survive, which is great. So the next step, I think, is to look at how we grow again, and that, for me, that's about connecting with all those other organizations out there that have, you know, shared interests, anywhere that might be interested in what we're doing, and finding organizations where they might be, in places where they might be, so that we can connect with them.
Yeah.
And there's some great stuff happening across the world, isn't there, John? You know, in branches and in local groups, just all throughout the world. And hopefully, you know, through the different communication mediums that we've got, through Facebook, the magazine, Dance Scottish Together, the Blether, hopefully we can start to share some of those ideas that are happening around the world, pick up the good ones that you think will work in your area, and continue on with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the other thing is that we've got quite a few very different audiences, and I think in the past we've not really had to speak to them differently, and we do need to going forward. We need to be the stuff that people who are just thinking about starting dancing need to know about, want to hear about, are interested in, is completely different from what, you know, a teacher or someone in an advanced class wants to hear about. And we need to get much better at speaking to those audiences directly and in a way that's interesting to them.
Yeah, so it's not one way fits everything. It's looking at it differently, and it's about us looking outwards. Definitely looking outwards to other organisations, linking up, and so on. And I mean, the volunteers, as you call them, John, quite rightly, the folks in the branches, in the groups who picked it up after COVID and got their heads out of the sand and decided, well, we'll just not go back to the way we did it. Let's look and see if we can do things better, differently. And where they are doing that, there is a great deal of success going on, which is absolutely terrific. In fact, that leads us on to our next guest, actually, in the Blether. Gary, our next guest.
Yeah, absolutely. Next month, we're delighted to be joined by Lucy Fallon from North East Derbyshire. And amongst other things, she's going to be talking about bringing in and retaining beginner dancers. So I think she's recently has taken in about 10 new dancers, and they're all still dancing. So I think that's part of this. The Blether is hopefully that, yes, we get to know people, but also we can share the great ideas that are working in different parts of the world, and then hopefully spread that across the other branches, and we can then pick that up and then run with these ideas. So it'll be great to speak to Lucy next month on the Blether.
It will be. So it's great news. We've got an open door at headquarters at the office for folks to come in. We're looking outwards. We're growing. It's all very positive. And John, much of that is thanks to you and the staff for what you're doing in the office. And hopefully the next time you come, John, you'll bring your guitar.
And I think you would thank me not to bring my guitar.
Maybe the theme tune, we could get John to play the theme tune.
Right. Like the Deer Hunter. Ding, ding, dee, 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 something like that. Anyway, John, thanks a lot for that. It's been absolutely great. And as I say, everyone, join us next month. Now, on your Dance Scottish Together newsletter, you'll see somewhere a date for getting questions in for Lucy. And do try and get your questions in so that we can ask Lucy these questions and share all that good practice that she's going to tell us all about, which is obviously having great success in North East Derbyshire. So from us both, I mean, at the moment, I'm just kind of sitting around, but Gary, you're busy building a gazebo, I hear, is that right?
Well, so my brother-in-law is busy building a gazebo. Yes.
So what are you doing then?
I'm supervisor. I'm the supervisor, chief tea maker, tea convener, bringer of biscuits, that kind of thing.
As usual, pretty useful.
Absolutely, yes.
Good, I'm glad about that. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, we'll leave you there, folks. It's been great seeing you all. Thanks to John for being our first guest. And until we meet again next month on the Blether, it's cheerio from him and me.
And it's cheerio from me and him.
Bye-bye.